Recording. Okay, and we're live. Thank you again. Thank you, Gayle, for doing this. Thank you so much for coming and agreeing to talk about Ethiopia and the work that you've been doing there.
A pleasure.
And I just want to quickly introduce you, and please forgive me if I don't do a thorough enough job. But please also correct me and jump in if you want to add something. But I did stalk your LinkedIn profile just before we got on this call, and Professor Gayle Allard, you've come with a background in Masters in International Affairs before you're getting your PhD in economics. And aside from a brief stint as a research economist, you've been a professor for, I'd say, most of your life, right?
And very long time now, yeah.
Yeah, across a multitude of great institutes. And
yes.
And now also kind of the focal point of this podcast is the fact that you're the founder of an NGO called Wahasira. Correct me if I'm pronouncing it wrong. And
that's correct.
All right, perfect. Focus on women's education and clean water access in Ethiopia specifically. So yes, did I do a good enough job? Is there anything else I might have missed out?
That sounds perfect to me. I'm American, but I've lived in Spain for most of my adult life, but I maintain really close contact with California.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, but you do shuttle between the two, right? Between Spain
I do. Yeah. I do, back and forth a lot. And Africa whenever I get a chance.
Do you do any teaching back in the US?
Occasionally, occasionally a seminar or a weekend course or something, but my home is the IE.
Right. So yeah, anyway, so we met, you were my economics professor in term one, and I had an absolute blast in your class. It was one of my favorite subjects. And luckily we were able to maintain that correspondence because I got to come with you to Ethiopia for the social service trip, and which, like I was telling you earlier, is one of the highlights of my MBA experiences. And
I'm so glad to hear that.
It absolutely was, and I thought this would be a great way for us to probably talk about, talk a little bit about the work that you do there, the experience that we shared, and what it looks like. How other people could potentially get involved and be a part of this experience.
So maybe you want to start with? You want me to tell you the background, how we got started there, why Ethiopia and why Dilla? Would that be a good place for us to start?
Absolutely. That's actually my number one question as well. But very quickly, before I do that, I want to throw some quick facts, and please feel free to correct me. I did some research, and I just wanted to put some facts together so that people who are listening have some context. As of now, we have about 62 million Ethiopians who lack access to safe water. And this is primarily because of drought and politics of the geopolitical scenario in Ethiopia itself. And secondly, when it comes to the second thing that you work on, which is women's education, while over the last decade, we do see that it's gone from 21% to 91% in terms of primary education, women are still not transitioning to, say, secondary or tertiary education, mostly because of distance, personal security, and economic challenges. So these are just some ground facts before we get into why. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to this, or things that we might be critical to know?
I mean, of course, there's simply poverty. That we're talking about one of the poorest nations in the world, GDP per capita of about, depending on whether you do it in purchasing power parity, 800 to 1,000 per person per year. So, combined with these really severe issues of women, the lack of opportunities for women, and the lack of access to clean water for everyone, there's simply poverty.
Yeah.
It's a nation that somehow needs to get itself out of the poverty trap.
And they are very interlinked, aren't they? Both of them, because I do remember from our trip there, it was women predominantly who had to line up to collect water.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Women bear the burden of the lack of water. It's the women who have to spend, the women or the children, but often the female children, that spend hours out of their day waiting in line for water or walking for water. And so this means that women um, are that girls are taken out of school earlier or miss a lot of school,
Yeah.
and women lose the opportunity to be able to do work that might give them some income because there's so much time involved in these basic tasks of life. The primary one being
So much time. Yeah.
getting water.
We did the math when we were there. It takes about 6 hours. If you're not in the front of the line, if you're say middle of the pack, it takes about 6 hours to walk away with a jerry can of water.
That's right, a jerry can, one
Yeah.
jerry can.
One jerry can. Yeah.
And then you have to come and fill it again, if there's a big family. So yeah, you're right. It can be for the little girls in certain times of the year. It can be their one activity.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Gail, why don't you tell us, how did you start off with, why Ethiopia, and how did you get started with the work that you do there?
Well, it all seems sort of random when I look back at it because it could have been anywhere, right? But I was very interested in Africa. I had started an Africa course at the IE. I had started doing some research and publishing some papers on Africa, just because the continent was so close and there was so much lack of knowledge, and I felt like the IE is the closest top business school to Africa. I thought we should be specialists, and so I kind of got involved. And then one year, I think it was probably about 8 or 9 years ago, a student came to the IE to do the IMBA. He was German, and he went to see the director of the IMBA and said, "I went to Ethiopia to volunteer when I was in university," he said, "and it changed my life. And I would like to share this with other IE students." And the director of the program said, "Oh, go see Gayle. She's crazy for Africa." So he came to see me. We didn't know each other. And he said, this just for me, it was life-changing to volunteer. He had gone down with St. Louis University. And at that time, they ran a summer program for children in English in a town called Zawai, kind of in the center of the country. And so he said, "Could we try to do something?" And so I said, "Yeah, let's do something." I proposed that we do a course, and make it a summer course, and the students could do work on Ethiopia prior to going, and we could have meetings to prepare materials, and then they could spend the 2 weeks working with the little kids down there. And so it turned out that Zawai was full. And there's this town, Dilla, which is in the south, about 400 kilometers from the Kenyan border, much poorer. And they said, "We don't have anything there. We don't have any English programs. Why don't you come here?" So I went down with this first group, and we created their first English summer program. It was just for girls. We taught them English for a few hours a day, and did games and dances and programs with them, and it was just a wonderful experience for all of us. I mean, I hope they learned some English. They did learn some, but it seemed like we learned so much, and they just opened their arms to us and took us home, and we really felt we had gotten a glimpse into the community. And so for me, that was it. I was just going to keep going. And so I started taking groups every summer. And the thing is, as time went on, I thought, are we really achieving something by giving these English classes in the summer? Sometimes I felt like we did. We had met some girls that had gone through the St. Louis summer program, and they had actually gone to university, were supporting their families. There were some encouraging pictures, but looking around, and particularly looking at the water problem that you're mentioning, I said, could we do something else? Because at the IE, our specialty, our comparative advantage is not teaching English to little girls. It's, entrepreneurship. And particularly, there's a lot of interest in social entrepreneurship. And I said, couldn't we do something there? And so, this whole process began. I had a student who had gone with me one year who went to work for an American water purifying company. And he said, Gayle, couldn't we do something in water in Ethiopia, jointly with my company? And so we worked on that for a while. We tried to find a project that they would be willing to invest in. And it was complicated because we needed a local partner. We needed to, we needed a model that we were sure would work because we were going to have to set things up, put the money in it, and then take off, right, and come back the next summer. And so, we worked on that for 3 or 4 summers, students researching, and we were visiting different water projects and how did people get their water, and what companies or what institutions were drilling or purifying or distributing water, all the things that were happening. And finally, one summer when we were, in the meantime, we continued teaching English to girls. We were teaching, and the father of one of the girls in our program came in to see me, and he said, I know you have an American water company on board, and I know you're from the IE, and I know this is a prestigious business school. And he said, I would really like to do something in the water space. I would really like to help my community to solve their water problem. And so we started working with him. This was Berhanu, whom you know.
Yeah.
And so, it's interesting when I look back, there's so many things that could have been different, if we hadn't been teaching the little girls English, we never would have gotten known in this community. We never would have met Berhanu. And for me, the interesting thing about all of this is that I learned that if you want to do something in another country, you can't just drop in with money for 2 weeks and take off. You need to know the people. You need to be very familiar with the problems. You need to have some local credibility. And so anyway, we started working with him, and students came up with a business plan for his water project. Initially, he wasn't really sure what he wanted to do. We explored different options with him, and finally, what he ended up doing was, I suppose we'll talk about this later, Gautam, so maybe I should stop and let you ask questions. But what we ended up doing was one of his options, and it's working. He's distributing water in the community, clean water.
Yeah, yeah. No, yeah, I totally agree with you. I think something that I take away from what you've just shared is it's probably taken 7 years. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you've been doing this for 7 years now.
Yes, this year would be the 8th year, and we didn't get to go this year because of COVID. But
so
we went down 7 years.
But
always with IE students. I went down with students like you.
With IE students, yeah. So it's taken 7 years to reach a level of influence, because it's taken that much time to establish the contacts required or get a sense of the country itself. And from my conversations with people there, it becomes very apparent that the Ethiopian bureaucracy is quite taxing.
Yes, and you remember when we were there, Gautam, we also met with
Chris,
former Peace Corps volunteer, an American guy, Chris.
Yeah.
Who had come to Ethiopia with money. He got a grant and started a water project. And his experience, as you will remember, he ran into very severe problems with importing his solar panels. And the reason he did was, even though he had experience in Africa and he loves Ethiopia and he had the money, he didn't have the local knowledge of customs procedures, what you do, whose name do you put on the form. It's really hard. It's really difficult to go into a developing country, no matter how great the need is, and to really do something.
And he had to abandon that whole solar panel plan as well, right? He went back to
although he moved on to something else. So the
generator, yeah.
Yeah, he decided that actually the panels that he had bought were not the appropriate ones for his project, and so he left them in customs, basically, which is really sad. But anyway, he did continue with the project. He ordered other panels. This time he knew what to do, and he continued forward.
This actually seems like a perfect opportunity for us to probably talk about Beranu's project and Chris's project and sort of compare which direction the future of these efforts should take. For
Yeah.
example, Beranu's project was a supply of clean water to households in cleansed jerry cans, and not the ones fashioned from old petroleum cans. And he wanted to use a whole donkey cart system to deliver it to each household. I think his primary motivation was to make sure that people didn't have to spend that much time every day waiting for clean water, and also that they did not use the kind of jerry cans that we saw, which were clearly not very sanitized.
Yeah.
Would I be correct in summarizing his project?
Yes. So, what we have, when you think about the water issue, there's the first part, which is to find water, to supply water for them, that's clean and safe. And so getting it out of the ground, or, is one part of it. And a lot of NGOs work in that space. There have been a lot of drills. World Vision International is one of them. We visited their projects, Gotham, together, you'll remember.
Right. Yeah.
But they'll drill wells and get the water out of the ground, and then the next step is distribution. And so Chris was involved in that, and Birhanu as well. And Birhanu, his story is an interesting one, because NGOs had been in Dilla, this town where we've worked all of these years. NGOs had been in Dilla, and they had drilled wells, and a good well can cost you, depending on how deep you have to go, $50,000. They're very expensive. So these great big NGOs, Charity Water, World Vision, some done by the Catholic Church, these wells had been drilled. But then what happens is that, after they drill the well, there's a pump at the top that you use to obtain your water. And these pumps, a lot of them are hand pumps. And you remember seeing these up in the North Gotham, where they're difficult to operate. A child can't operate a lot of these hand pumps. It takes a man or a really strong woman, or two women together. We saw that, to pump them and really get the water flowing. So in Dilla, they had drilled, I think it was 11 different wells that had the hand pump at the top, and the pumps had broken. And here's another problem that happens with these charity efforts and these efforts to help with water, is that once the NGO has created the well and they've gone home, sometimes it breaks, and there is not local expertise to repair it, and there isn't money, and there aren't parts to repair it. And so these 11 boreholes, small wells in Dilla, had sat there for up to 30 years. In a town that desperately needed water. These boreholes were just sitting there unusable. And so Birhanu, when he wanted to do something in the water space, he talked to the government, and here's the great advantage of being a local and an insider. He talked to the government. He said, really like to do something. And they said, we've got these 11 boreholes that have been sitting there for decades and have not been used. And he said, take them. As long as you will repair them and get the water out, we'll let you sell it. We just want people to be able to get water. So that was a project that he finally opted for. He talked about water filtering. He talked about going down to the river and cleaning water and distributing it there. But he finally opted for this project, which was to start with a pilot, choose one borehole, and we actually went down there with a water scientist, and we looked at the depth of the different wells and decided on one. And what he did was he removed the old hand pump, and Gotham, we watched this being done in a town, didn't we? We saw them in action, the whole town pulling out the old system, not losing it inside, and then connecting it to a solar pump. Yeah. Which is what he did. And of course, our role in all of this was to help him with the technology so that he knew exactly what he needed, and then to provide the funds. And I have an NGO that we funded all of his startup costs, and to provide the funds so he could buy the solar panels, the pump, the jerry cans that you were talking about. So he has clean jerry cans. They're green, so they're different from all of these petrol cans around the town. So it's supposed to invoke in people's minds the idea of something clean. And what they do is they pump the water. They've got a storage tank. They pump the water from this well that was unusable, and they put it into the jerry cans, and then they deliver it by donkey cart, which is the normal form of delivery of water in that town and many things. And then as they deliver the water to a household, the household returns to them the jerry cans that they had obtained in the last delivery, and so they take them back and they wash and sterilize them. And this is a continuous process. So this is what Berhanu is doing. And actually with COVID, things were interrupted a bit because in an effort to control the spread of the virus, the government rounded up the street children. There's an awful lot of street children that just, they live on the streets and don't have families, or they may have families, but they're in another town, or so they housed these street children in government university buildings.
Right.
And the government went to him, the city government went to Berhanu and said, would you please provide water for these children? So he started out just providing water free to the children, and then moved on to, he was actually providing hand washing stations and cleaning stations for volunteers and for local people as well, and charged them a small fee. And then he actually got the home delivery business going. So that's his business, is just in the distribution to households area of water that's coming up out of a pre-existing borehole. Now, Chris, who is a Peace Corps volunteer we've talked about, he is doing the same thing. He's working on distribution because he's not drilling the wells. But what Chris is doing, as you know, Gotham, is he's actually laying the pipelines.
Yeah, pipelines at homes.
Exactly. He's bringing it to homes, which is such a concept. We're so used to this, but in Ethiopia, in the towns, nobody has water in their home.
And I don't know if you remember, but I was extremely keen on Chris's project.
Yes.
While I had, I mean, I love Beranu's as well, but I was very, very keen on Chris because I just felt like it was taking like 2 steps at a time.
Yes, it was.
We were going directly to a commodity that we take for granted in a developed country. We were able to provide, I mean, Chris was able to provide that almost immediately, and in a village very similar to one that Berhanu was working on. And I do remember Chris also had some really, really interesting, very cool, and if I'm remember the term correctly, it's something that you told me, he employed a lot of frugal innovation, where he used those SMS balls to close off pipes that were damaged, and so that he could analyze. I mean, he could come and fix them later. But in your opinion, which approach do you think is the right one for Ethiopia right now? The one with Berhanu, where there's an improvement on an already existing system. You're taking it, say, 1 step at a time, versus Chris, where you're sort of jumping ahead much further than, and skipping a few steps in between.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that Chris went all the way down the line and took the water right to households, which was fascinating and very bold. Required a lot of money, and he received a huge grant from U.S. aid, from foreign aid in the United States, and he was hoping that eventually, as people paid for the water use and then paid the one-time fee to have the tank installed, they had a little tank right outside their back door with water that they could draw on. He was hoping that it would eventually cover costs. The problem with his project is the capital requirement was so high, and the revenues were very uncertain. You remember, Gotham, he was having trouble figuring out, he wanted to meter the water. He wanted to use a meter because people were using a lot of water and not paying very much. And he wanted to install meters, but of course those were expensive. And so the capital requirements are just beyond those of the average Ethiopian entrepreneur, which is why, we worked with Berhanu, not because we liked his project better, but because we could afford it. Because
No,
my NGO is very small.
and I think that makes sense as well, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you want to be able to make, you want to immediately start improving lives, and then step by step, I suppose, it will eventually reach where Chris envisioned. And I think another thing, Chris had many caveats. Now that I think back, he had to have a perfect village, the one that had a perfect grid layout,
Yeah.
and at least some semblance of a road, so that he could know where to lay the pipes. And they already had a rudimentary water system, if I'm not wrong, which he sort of
Yes. The wells were dug, and people could go to the pump and obtain water, but he wanted to bring it into their homes.
right.
It was really idealistic. It was a
It was
beautiful
very
project. You
idealistic.
remember, Gotham, that one of his issues was just providing maps of the village.
Yeah, I remember.
know, where are the houses, and what, which street is this and which street is that.
Yeah.
And working with, because every village has a water board, or every kabele, the group of villages, has a water board where they, he would have to go through them for decisions of pricing and distribution, and so Chris, boy, he was brave, because what he took on, not being an Ethiopian,
Yeah.
Was so ambitious. And of course, probably the country eventually has to go in that direction. One of the things that I think about as I look at the water problem in Ethiopia, Gotham, is I think really this is the role of government, isn't it? It's government should be doing these things, because it's hard for the private sector. It's hard for a social entrepreneur to cover his or her costs in one of these projects, without
absolutely.
aid or grants.
Absolutely, I absolutely agree, and I think this is where I in my experience as well, I drew a lot of parallels with where I come from in India, where you see a similar situation as well, where you have private sectors and private NGOs trying to solve problems that the government should actively be involved in.
Yes, and it's hard to solve them adequately, because they are really in the public space. They should be solved by the public sector. And so, how do you, if you're Chris, how do you become a public utility, being a private company? Well, he solved that question by getting a lot of foreign aid, and he had the contacts in the United States. An Ethiopian might have found that difficult to do. He was able to tap, I don't know, do you remember, Gotham, was it $600,000 in aid from USA? Do you remember?
I'm not sure. I don't remember.
It was a lot of money. Whereas for us to help Berhanu, to get him set up with his jerry cans, his storage tank, his panels, his batteries and pump, it cost about $6,000.
Yeah, which is great. And how many households would he have been able to, or is he currently able to reach out to with his pilot?
I think we were hoping when he was, of course, COVID has sort of interrupted everything, but I think the number of households that were in the immediate vicinity, just people who could be served. But of course, he's now serving all over the town. So,
right.
Our calculations were that there were about 100 households in the immediate vicinity of that pump.
Right.
So we thought, well, he'll serve those 100 households, which have average household size was 7. So it'd be 700 people immediately. But he is delivering all over town. So I don't know. I don't know how many. It's more than we thought it would be. And then, of course, he's giving water to the children, and he now has a request in that we're the NGO we have to decide on, but I'm pretty sure we'll say yes. The city has asked if he would give water to the poorest families, and we would pay for it at the market rate. Families that can't afford it. So there's that other component that we didn't anticipate. We were thinking social entrepreneurship, you cover your costs with these market activities, but there are a lot of non-market things going on because of the poverty in Dilla.
Right. Right.
So I don't know the number right now. And I don't know if he knows. But he's ready to expand. He wants to. So our hope was, and you remember this, Gotham, as well. Our hope was we'd get this pilot going, and then he could expand to other neighborhoods. And eventually, we were hoping that, with his profits, he could start to self-finance the expansion, which he's not in a position to do yet because he can't. We don't want him selling the water at a very high price.
Right.
And at the price he sells, he can cover variable costs, but he can't cover those startup costs.
Right.
So it's a dilemma, but it's very small, but it has been successful.
No, yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's great. I really enjoyed interacting with Birhanu as well. He's a great man, and it's really good. It's good work that he's doing there. But
yeah,
very, very tied to the water issue itself is education, right? And as we already discussed, it's primarily the duty of children and more than children, women, to collect this water and dedicate a huge chunk of their day to collecting this water.
yeah.
And I do remember we visited that school, which uh, which which was a very eye-opening experience for me, because I remember the principal or the headmaster telling
It's funny.
that they had to shut down in between for a couple of years because they just did not have the funds to pay teachers to come and teach students over there. And that was one of the schools that was easy access for a lot of the villagers. But once that shut down, they stopped sending their kids to school, or they had to send them to the city or send them far away, which was not an option for a lot of them.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, in your opinion, how can do you think solving this water crisis and projects like Biranu's would have a big enough impact on education directly, what will we have to do to supplement or to increase this, the rate of education itself among children, especially women?
Well, solving or addressing the water problem is one way to help to get women to school. But we also felt like we had to be more direct. So the NGO that I started, we are at the school at Botswana, at the school where we met Botswana. We are giving scholarships to the neediest girls. So I think there were 20 scholarships last year. And then during the worst part of the COVID crisis, which it's starting up again there, so we may have to start this again. We started a feeding program. So these girls that had scholarships, who are the poorest of the poor, they're selected from, the school is a Baptist school. So there were girls from the Baptist community, there were girls from the Catholic community, and there were girls who were not associated with any church at all. So he tried to get an equal number of each, but always the poorest of the poor. And we did a feeding program for them. So they would come in the morning, and they would get breakfast, and then they would play for a while and sing, and just kind of be there at the school with some adult supervision. And then they would they would eat lunch and take home dinner that would be shared with the family. And so we ran that for a month. It just ended recently. So all of these things, there are so many, when there's such deep poverty, and probably the people listening to this have not seen anything like this kind of poverty. You have got them, but dirt floors, all of the families sleeping in one bed. The food for a week may be consisting of those little tortillas, the injera, which is made of a grain, and maybe they can only eat it with some spice
very basic
and oil.
Spices, yeah.
Exactly. Maybe you get some vegetables, and if you're really lucky, one day a week maybe you get some meat. There could be some lentils, but you're talking about poverty at a level that none of us have come anywhere near experiencing. And so You know, when poverty is that deep, there are so many problems associated with it, and you start looking and you don't know where to start. And so what we have done is we've given scholarships at this school, we've given scholarships at the Catholic school in town. The churches run all the private schools, so this is why we're working with faith institutions. And then what we want to do, and we haven't, I hope that we'll get this started in the fall, but what we want to do is set up scholarships for young women to study water. I don't think it's called water engineering at the at Dilla University. I think it's water management or something. But we'd like to set up a scholarship so that girls can study, which, you know, you kind of kill three birds with one stone there, because, you know, you get minds centered on the water issue. You give them a professional outlet so they can actually have some independence and help their families.
Right.
You know, you're also addressing the poverty issue, because there are a lot of girls that couldn't study.
Right.
But anyway, this is something we want to start this fall. We have funds to do it, but since we didn't go to Dilla this year, we weren't able to go and meet with the university, with the people, with the deans to set it up. But anyway, that's on our immediate agenda. So, you know, to support women, I think education is probably the best way to go. And you really have to look at it at various levels. You've got to think of elementary education. You've got to think of university education. You've got to think of, you know, freeing up their time with you know, water provision so they can actually go to school. You have to think about them getting enough to eat. There's a lot of angles to this, right?
A lot of angles to it. Just to go back to how you started, like, so initially when you were going to Ethiopia, it was more to run an English camp per se for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Do you think there's benefit in doing that again, probably for an extended period, say a month, where you have students from IE or say any foreign university who go in there and go to these villages like Dilla and invest a month teaching specifically women, you know, either skills or teaching very specific subjects during that time. Do you think that would be impactful? I know it's only a month, so I'm a little skeptical about how much can be taken away from that, but there might be some benefit to doing that as well, right?
Yeah, we had this conversation the last year that we ran the English camp, because we were reaching very, very poor girls. We worked with the Catholic nuns. They provided us with the buildings, and they housed us while we worked in the summer camp. And they selected the girls to come, and they were, you know, from the community, the poorest of the poor. They charged them a tiny amount, a nominal amount, so that they would take it seriously and come, right?
Uh-huh.
And if the girls couldn't afford it, the sisters would give them a scholarship, but they had a little card, you know, trying to make sure the girls came, because often, you know, there would be some need at home. Sometimes they had to bring a baby to camp because, you know, there was a baby at home, the mother couldn't take care of or something. But we talked about this a lot, and we said how in a month, or actually 2 weeks is what we were doing, because it was hard to find a whole month in people's schedule. As you know, Gotham, there's a lot of things going on in summer. But we talked about maybe it would have made more sense to do a focused English class to maybe older girls, an accelerated class, you know, to ask for the best students at the schools, and give them an accelerated course in small groups. We talked about a lot of options. The reason that English was important is that in Ethiopia, starting in 8th grade, they do all of their classes in English, even though the professors don't really speak that well. And you know, what they tell me is that professors are actually speaking Amharic or Oromo or whatever the local language is in the classroom, but the exams are in English. Uh-huh. And you know, the college entrance exams are in English, and you know, throughout high school, the exams are in English. And so the kids that don't know English never get a chance. They just can't move forward. And this is why we wanted to help. But I'm not sure. I mean, I know my students loved it. They loved it. They just wanted to keep coming back and doing the same thing. And the students loved us. And, it was a very heartwarming and exhilarating and fun experience. And we did try to get to the poorest of the poor, but I don't know in a month how much, I don't know how much we achieved. I think maybe if we had been able to have select groups and very small groups and continue year after year with the same group, maybe, I don't know, girls that were hoping to go to university, maybe the schools could select, I don't know. Eventually we went with the water, and so I kind of dropped all of my questions about this issue, but that had been our thinking. We want to provide them the background so they can go to school.
So I suppose solving the water crisis is like a stepping stone in that direction. It's going to have ramifications across education as well, right? Just because they're how interconnected they are. So
that's right.
So it's bound to have a positive effect on that going forward for sure. But please.
I was sorry to end the English camps because of how enriching it was for all of us. Right. But I think maybe we're addressing a problem more effectively and using our skills, our competitive advantage as IE students and professors more effectively with the water project, because we know how to do business plans. Yeah. We know how to address business problems. And so maybe we'll have more impact that way. I don't know. We'll see. Time will tell.
But I absolutely agree. I mean, it took me just one trip to Ethiopia to see that solving the water crisis has to be the number one focus, because it's a basic human right, which a lot of Ethiopians living there don't have fair access to. So,
it's just the numbers are just shocking. I mean, this because you were there with me. There was a mother of a large family saying, we asked her how much water they had available per day, and she said, well, it works out to, I mean, we did the numbers because she was just telling us how many jerry cans. They had 5 liters of water per person per day in that household. It was partly because it's expensive, partly because you have to go so far and wait so long to get it. 5 liters of water.
Yeah, and 5 liters is not a lot. It sounds like a lot, but we waste so much just taking a shower.
Oh my gosh. I mean, we need that much to drink a day, don't we? Well, just a little bit more. But they're cooking, they're bathing, they're cleaning, they're giving their animals water, they're drinking this with 5 liters of water per person.
Yeah, it's
shocking.
It's a very small amount. I don't remember the exact number. I did have that in my head, how much an average person uses, but 5 liters a day is ridiculously less.
Yeah, I think we use, we got to go liters to gallons, but I think our usage is in the hundreds of gallons per person per day.
Yeah, I'm actually looking it up right now just to...
Okay, good, because I don't recall. But, 5 liters is just nothing. And I think about that. I think about how we run the tap when we wash dishes and our showers. And I think, how would you get by cleaning clothes, cleaning dishes?
So I can give you a figure right now. Just a shower alone can go from 50 to 100 liters.
50 to 100 liters. There you are.
A shower alone.
That's something.
So, yeah, I mean, 5 liters is nothing, really.
Nothing.
And
so you remember, Gotham, you remember that day when we were walking through that neighborhood and the kids were carrying the jerry can home.
Yeah, and it became like I was almost desensitized to that side towards the end of it, because everywhere you go, you just have kids who have these jerry cans strapped to their bodies, or who have them, carrying them on their hip, because it's just so common. Towards the end, I barely noticed it, to be honest.
And they're so heavy. Those cans are so heavy.
Yeah.
I remember we were walking and you took you and I don't know who was with you. Took a jerry can from a little girl to see its weight.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah, I actually carried it till the gate for one of the
And
kids, and it was.
she was so upset. She was so worried that you were taking her
Oh,
water.
right. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
And
she thought we
you
were.
know, you wanted to see how heavy it was and see what this was like. And she was, you know, she had to get home with that can of water, and she was so upset. Remember that?
She started crying. Yeah, because she thought
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was stealing it from her.
yeah. But it was heavy, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It's extremely heavy, and I mean, she was bent over back. But it looked so like she seemed so conditioned
Yes,
uh, for
yeah,
labor, right? And
yes,
that's what
that's
I
right.
remember as well. Like a 3-year-old kid, she was being conditioned to carry a jerry can. She wasn't carrying a full one yet, but she already knew like, okay, she has to how to strap it on her back, and she would go with her.
That little girl, you remember that?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh
I
my
remember that.
gosh.
I
Yeah,
mean, it's just it's very unfortunate, and I think this has to be the main focus. I
yeah,
mean, the main crisis to solve.
yeah.
But to sort of almost do a 360. I was extremely. But well, you weren't there for that, but we did spend the last 2 days at the hackathon in
Yes,
Addis
yes.
Ababa, and I was just amazed at the kind of projects that the university kids in the city were coming up with, and just in 2 days. And I
Yeah.
just wanted to get your sense. Should we be looking at building that startup culture in Addis Ababa, because that could have potentially mean a lot of good things in terms of not just startups within Ethiopia solving the Ethiopian water crisis, but also in Africa is the next big market. I mean, we should be looking at uh, a startup coming out of that ecosystem. Do you think
Yeah.
there's there's merit in investing time and money in that space?
Yeah, again, you know how I feel about this. I think the public sector should be doing it. And I think it's hard to make money in that space. And if you make money in that space, there's always the ethical question of should I be making money off of this desperate need for water? But being things as they are, with the public sector not addressing this problem for people, there's a massive demand and there's lots of room for innovation that, of course, it requires capital. But do you remember with World Vision that they were, their hope was that the next step, of course, they invested tens of thousands of dollars in every project because they would sink the well, they would run the tubes, they would put in solar panels to pump to power the well and the pumping of the water, and they then had a distribution center. Do you remember he said that what they wanted to do was they wanted to make it sort of a water ATM. That was their hope, that the next step would be, you know, have the technology there and have a robust enough system where where the people could go in with a card, come in this gate that encloses the water pump, and insert their card in the machine. They would have prepaid and they could receive their water. I mean, there are digital solutions even for communities that are barely being used yet,
Right.
which could be really interesting on the distribution part. But I think you looked at a lot of other kinds of questions, solving problems like, what do you do when something breaks down in the system?
Yeah.
What different ideas that you saw in this hackathon that the kids were coming up with, right?
I mean, yeah, and I've been thinking about it. Like, if I eventually I want to be in a place where I can invest in small businesses, and
Ah,
I've been thinking that going back to Addis Ababa and investing with Ice Addis, the startup incubator, it made so much sense to me because it seems to me that that's the market that needs innovation right now, and there's a
yes,
lot of
it does.
potential there. You have a lot of smart kids uh, uh, doing incredible, who are coming up with these incredible ideas in just 2 days.
Yeah,
It just makes me think that it's a place I want to go back to and see what
yeah,
potential business I could help.
yeah, yeah. Well, there's definitely there is such a space for you. There's such a need for a person like you, and I think if they could at least get the basic supply problem addressed. You know, we have a well, we've pumped the water, we've brought it to a center, then probably from there, the distribution problem could be addressed in a lot of more innovative ways.
Yeah.
And maybe you need to get into that space, Gotham.
Yeah, maybe I will. I mean, never say never. Right? I mean, I definitely want to go back and, but actually, yeah, since we're talking about it, like, why do you think an MBA student should take this trip or should invest this 2 weeks in Ethiopia? I mean, I have my personal opinion, but and I'd love to share that initially before you tell us why you think. But
yeah, I want to hear from you because you're the expert. I can just tell you in general what I think. I think
I think it's Please go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, so for me, I think being in IE, living in Madrid, and I lived in Dubai for a large part of my life. I did live in India as well, but I lived a good life. I think you tend to, especially in Madrid, you tend to live in a bubble. You don't quite see. You hear about these issues. You hear about crisis in, say, Ethiopia, anywhere else, but you don't really get a sense of what it actually means till you see it. And then when it comes to you actually making an impact, it's real world application of things that you're reading cases about or you're reading books about in class. And I think that's where I think you bridge the gap between theory and practical, because you get a sense that, okay, just understanding a concept and then applying it there is vastly different, because there's a lot of things that change, a lot of things that that just evolve with that whole transition. But also the fact that I think, and also most importantly for me, is that work there. It's not about any monetary gain that you get out of it after that 2 weeks, but it's more about you probably, it's understated, but you can make an impact in 2 weeks when you're there. And I think that's what I really take away from it. And I would highly recommend anyone to take those 2 weeks, or those 2 weeks that you could probably spend traveling across Europe or anywhere else. Take those 2 weeks to go and see a whole different world that requires your knowledge, requires your skills, and where you can actually make an impact. And
yeah, I think you've summed it up so well. I would say the eye-opening part, people are not at all prepared to see extreme poverty. You know, we sit in our classroom and we talk about social issues, which are real and they're important. But you realize that the issues that some people face are way beyond those that we're sort of turning our energies to, and they're very urgent. And so I think that awareness and the opportunity really on this trip to interact with locals. You're not just coming in as a tourist and seeing.
No, not at all. I had an absolute blast interacting with locals. My new best friend Alan, one of the best.
Oh, he's the best. He's the best, isn't he?
The best. I mean, I wouldn't even. I don't even want to just call him a tour guide, because I think that would be an insult. He really was. He really was part of the gang at the end.
Yes. And Ethiopia is such a wonderful country because since it was never colonized, you don't have a lot of the issues that you find in former colonies of, you know, this very stratified society and the resentment against the whites and the you know, kind of imposition of foreign customs. It's very exotic. It's them. And that's hard to find. But I think another thing you mentioned, and I just wanted to add to this, you talked about how rewarding it was and how you felt like you could make an impact in a short period. And something that I often think about is that I think we're clearly wired to do things for others. You know, that's part of who we are, and we don't emphasize that in our education. We don't emphasize it in the MBA. A lot of our life is about, you know, promoting your brand, getting ahead, networking, you know, things for yourself. And I think when people, like you said, go and do something for nothing, just sort of throw themselves, all their energy and their intelligence and their abilities, they throw it into a project with no expectation of return. It's so deeply satisfying. You know,
Absolutely.
we
Yeah.
forget how important it is to do something for others. We forget how much it really boosts us emotionally, psychologically. And I think for me, that's what I have seen over and over again with this program, that students just, they forget themselves. They've been so focused on, you know, what's my next job? Have I made the right contacts? You know, and they just play with kids, and they just, you know, turn their minds to trying to solve a problem that's not their problem, and something they can't get any money out of it. And they're so satisfied. And for me, that's really, I see that being a deep insight for people, that I really do need to incorporate into my life, doing something for other people just because, in no expectation of reward, because it does wonderful things for you.
Absolutely. I think well said. And do you think it's going to happen next year? I mean, this year it's pretty much not going to, but do you think
I have every intention. I really want, my hope, and you know, just keeping ambitions very small, but they could grow if you know, if the money is available and if the needs arise. But my hope is to expand this pilot of Rehanu's, and maybe to see the model, you know, to kind of a template that people could use in surrounding towns, if there are other entrepreneurs, and maybe, you know, we could finance the first part of this project in other towns. And I really want to get the scholarships going at the university so that women can start turning their minds to how to solve this problem for their country. Yeah. So I have every intention of continuing to go and raising money for the NGO, and we put 100% of everything we raise into these projects. So yeah, I plan to be there for a while. I hope it's possible.
That is fantastic. Gayle, that concludes all the questions that I had for you. Thank you so much for taking this time. It's been great talking about this and, you know, learning more about it from you.
And remembering, we had some nice memories from last summer.
Absolutely. And yeah, quickly, the Ethiopian culture is phenomenal, and the food is really good as long as someone else doesn't order for you.
You might get raw meat if somebody else orders for you.
Yeah, which is a delicacy for them, and nothing to take away from it, but it's not for me. And I've enjoyed the food tremendously when I ordered, especially the vegetarian platter that they have during their fasting days.
Oh, it's wonderful, isn't it?
Absolutely wonderful, clean, good food. It's a great place to visit. I had an absolute blast, and I would highly recommend any MBA student coming into IE to take this opportunity, because you have the opportunity to go see all these fancy places your entire life, but you will.
Yeah.
This 2 weeks will change the way you see a lot of things, and I think it's worth taking that.
Yeah, most definitely. And I'm so glad you came, Gotham, because it was, it's always, for me, it's so enriching to get to spend that extended time with students. You know, you see people in the classroom, but it's never the same. And it's always, these become, you know, my students that come to the Ethiopia trip are on my friend list forever. It's always such a wonderful.
No, absolutely. It was my pleasure. And I really enjoyed that trip. And which is why I keep trying to be involved, because I think I really want to, it's not a one-off thing for me. I want to be involved, and I definitely want to go back and see what I can do, how I can contribute as well.
Well, we'll find a way. We'll find stuff for you to do for sure.
And absolutely. Thank you so much, Gayle, for doing this. And really, I look forward to our coffee at the in a couple of weeks.
And thanks for the opportunity, Gotham.
No, it's my pleasure.
Okay, so we'll talk soon.
We'll talk soon. Yeah.
All right.
Perfect, Gayle.